Hey, it's Tim, Pickup Truck Plus SUV Talk, joined by a new friend of mine. The car guy online is here in person talking about trucks because the trucks are awesome. And it's his first live stream, so let's be kind and conscious of other people. Be nice, boys.
I
Be
say
nice.
beat me up as much as you want.
So, how you doing?
Pretty good. Yeah,
Good.
how you been?
I've been good.
I saw your latest video on the 200,000 mile Tundra, so that could be a good lead in to the intro.
Yeah, so you actually kind of inspired that video. So let me get into this a little bit. So I've watched the car guy online. He's at a new channel, and he's been doing a lot about recalls and different things, maintenance issues and things, and new vehicles. And there was a lot of conversation today, not today, but there's a lot of conversation the last, I want to say 4 or 5 years about small displacement turbocharged engines and concerns about reliability of that. And it's new, it's different. I get it. It's a huge issue. And I was on a couple different Facebook groups, and I'm on forums and stuff. Because what else do you do during the day when it's 6 degrees in Nebraska? You are online a lot. It's what happens. And so I had found a truck that was a 200,000 mile Tundra, which is the new generation of 3.4 liter twin turbo V6. And he actually had a full Carfax report, which I copied and basically. The Carfax report was actually kind of terrible to layout and font, so I helped you out there, guys. I took care of one for the team. I spent time on the Google Sheets for a while and get it all cleaned up for you to make sense of it all. And it's quite remarkable because, as you know, the car guy, that you've seen, that there's a lot of conversation about reliability and things as far as that goes, and oil changes and what do you do. And so it was kind of interesting. And you just muted yourself. I don't know how.
Yeah, I was just muting myself as you talk, but yeah, it's interesting. I think, it's like anything. I think you can find high mileage versions of anything, and especially something like, it didn't even look, I was looking at the bed pictures you had and everything. I think that may have been the same one that I had on one of my videos recently. And it was cleaner than I would expect a hotshot vehicle to be. Mm-hmm. In the bed, and because they're usually throwing bigger stuff back there, but it was obviously lots of highway miles, which my goal, starting out, actually I could go back to why I even started the channel.
Yes, please do.
And so most people think I hate Toyota. I've still got 2 Toyotas in my garage. I got the 2008 Sequoia with a 5.7 and a 2018 Camry, and I actually was in the market for a new Tundra. So just spent all this time researching online, and I kept finding, the same thing over and over, just all those failures coming up and problems with things that Toyota just didn't traditionally have problems with. And it was like, okay, I'm going to wait it out a little bit, wait it out a year. And the problems kept getting worse. It seemed, at least for the 2022 and early 2023s. And that's when I kind of started my channel and started talking about it. So that was kind of the genesis of really my channel. I didn't really expect it to go that direction when I first started. My goal for the channel was to actually champion how much I love Toyota, which probably shocks some people. Some of my early videos, if you go look, like I had a whole, playlist of why I thought Toyota was so good at reliability. Not cush, not the best riding, not the best quality on the interior components. It was just the reliability aspect of things not failing over 300, 400, 500,000 miles and just being so durable. So yeah, that was kind of the, I guess, goal of the channel, and it's just kind of gone every which way. And I thought it would be a great shocker if I just bought that Tundra with 200,000 miles, put it as my next video.
So I don't know where you're at, but I've been texting TRG John. He's on his way back from South Carolina, and he's actually talking about pulling over and checking the truck out.
Yeah.
And Vic Shepard, he's got the Million Mile Truck guy. I've done some video right up there, the stories I've written on that guy. He's actually about 6 hours from that guy. And so they're like 6 hours apart. So I was like debating driving my RHO down my Ram and doing both stories. Because and the reason I put that video out is I've met a lot of people like you that have been really staunch Toyota fans. And then something changes in the viewpoint of it. Something messed up the algorithm, right? So all of a sudden, Toyota was great, and all of a sudden it's not. And it's funny because I started this job at Tundra headquarters back in 2000, not 06, but a ways ago. So I started reporting on this, and I've seen a lot of concerns even back then. The 5.7 had some air injection pump issues. It had some one of the towers was leaking oil. So there's been some issues, but I find that most Toyota people, and it's kind of a hard way to say this, is that they just love the brand so much for reliability. They didn't see those things. And it was funny when I bought the 22 Tundra, I did videos like on, I did a stupid video like on the rear view camera was digital now. Like, oh my God, it's best in class. It's groundbreaking. And I'm like, we've had that for years in other places. And so it's interesting how that has changed over the time period, and how that 2020, the third gen Tundra, has changed a lot of people's opinions. I have a lot of cousins who love the Tundra. And when third gen came out, created a lot of questions in their head. They have a lot of concerns.
Yeah, I think they're going to get it figured out eventually. I think the thing that bugged me the most about it was reading the report that details out when they started investigating and when they were actually first aware of the first failures of the main bearing. And I think it was like early 2022, March of 2022, when they first had their first failure. And then I think July, they had their second failure. So they were already aware of the engine debris process in early 2022. And when we kept seeing the 23s and then the early 24s still failing at a higher rate than I think anybody expected, then it was just like, man, they knew about it in 22. And they said that they went through the cleaning process and fixed everything. But then you start considering this might be some weird design issue. This might be some bearing material from, a manufacturer maybe they switched to in COVID, and it could be anything at this point. And then, 2024 rolls around. I think it was April. They changed one bearing part number on the main bearing and another part of the short block. So 2 part numbers changed in, I think in April of 2024, something like that. So that everybody's hopeful that was it, like maybe they identified, maybe it was engine debris and some material, some bearing. You just don't know. But then you see a 2022 with 200,000 miles and you say, well, is it something as simple as an oiling issue with the oil pump, the variable oil pumps when you're on the highway and you're at 2,000 RPMs for the majority of your driving and you're not stop start and you're putting on 30,000, 40,000 miles a year? That's a lot easier on an engine than grunting torque through low gears, through stop and start, with cold oil and then having to warm it up on short trips. So, there's just so much to think about with it that I hope they get it figured out. Cause I think if I was in the market, it would be either, the GMC Duramax, the 3-liter Duramax for a half ton, or the Tundra for me still. And the 10-speed is a little annoying, but I could fix the valve body. It's like, whatever. Mm-hmm. The wet oil pump bugs me. There's no perfect truck. That's what I feel like. And I think maybe that's the frustration coming out from half of the crowd. You get like, it feels bifurcated. Like half the audiences are really just tired of worrying about buying a brand new truck and having issues. And then there's another half of, I think, the country that's like, whatever, I'm just going to buy it and keep it through warranty anyway. And I'm fine with that. And if it has a problem, it has a problem. And it's just kind of 2 schools of thought, where some people want to keep something really long term. Other people know they're not going to, and they're okay with churning vehicles every 2 to 3 years. And so these trucks and maybe the reliability past warranty doesn't bug them. And I think that's a big part of it too.
Yeah, no, there's a lot to that, right? So I always chuckle because I've had the YouTube channel for a while now, whatever. I've been working hard on it the last 4 or 5 years, actually more than that. What was it, 2016? I really got going, maybe 18. So I've had it for a while. It always people come to me like, I'm gonna keep this truck forever. This is my last truck I'm gonna buy. And then I get an email like 3 years later going, well, I thought it was the last truck I was gonna buy, but guess what? I'm gonna buy a new truck, right? Because I think invariably, I've talked to my uncles about this who've had old Broncos and different things, and you tend to get bored, and you tend to go,
Yeah.
what else is out there around there? And you always want to buy this one last vehicle, because I think that the other thing people don't always understand is that, the auto market sold 16 million vehicles last year,
Yep.
and we're on pace maybe 17 million by the time the numbers all got straightened out. But that's only like what 0.5% of the U.S. population.
Yeah.
So most people never in their lives buy a brand new truck. And so buying a brand new truck is a huge issue because they've never done it. And my dad was a good example. He never bought a new truck until he finally retired. And he was like, I'm going to buy a Sierra Denali, and I'm going to buy the highest trim level and kind of stuff, and all the features and everything, because that was his truck to buy. And now he's on his fourth Cadillac. It's like, but you get to the point where it's like, in the buying segment really is between 45 to 65. That's the average customer range.
Yeah.
And because at that point in your life, you finally have, maybe your mortgage is okay, maybe your job's better, maybe you finally have the finances, student loans paid off, maybe credit card debt's paid off. You've done all the 20s bar spending stuff out of your system, and you have the point where you want to buy this new vehicle. And it does create some those things where now it's like, this is your major purchase. And yes, customers are right that truck payments are the same as your mortgage. That's what it is today.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, affordability is a huge issue in the industry, and there's a lot of reasons for that beyond, corporate greed. Fine, part of that, but there's also a lot of mandatory safety features, which I'm all for. My father-in-law is in the 70s, and if I can get a brand new vehicle with sensors and also, I would sign him up tomorrow, man. That man makes me nervous driving around the block, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they do help, but there is that thought process about how long do you keep the vehicle. In reality, the average truck buyer on paper is between 5 to 6 years.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And loan terms don't even come close to that number.
Yep. Yeah, and the average loan, I mean, I can't believe how much some people are paying for their trucks. I get it if they're, if it's a business and you're not, you're buying something as a business, a YouTuber or someone in fleet, and they get a low interest rate, it actually makes sense not to spend a bunch of capital to just churn trucks every 5 years.
Right.
But for everybody else, it's tough. It's a tough pill to swallow to say, well, you're going to lose 30 grand in depreciation and pay, 2 to 5%, and your payment's going to be $1,200 to $1,500 a month. It's like, how are you going to save any money unless you're just an extremely high income earner? So,
yeah, no, I get the criticism all the time, and it's fair, right? I don't keep trucks that long. I have kept trucks longer. I had we had a CRV for 10 years. I fixed the door 17 different times. I was tired of fixing the damn door. The door actuator motor kept going out, and it kept breaking the handles. I've had vehicles longer period of times, but for my business, it makes no sense. Nobody wants to see a 23 Tundra versus a 26 Tundra. Nobody cares. And so, and for taxes wise, I mean, my payment on my Ram RHO is like $1,200 a month, I think it is.
Yeah.
And I really don't care. And that sounds like I'm being a dick about it, and I am being whatever, and I'm looking at who I am. But the reality is, I'm going to send that money to the IRS and a check anyways.
Right.
So I'd rather make the truck payment than I would send it to the IRS.
That's the only reason I've even been looking.
Right.
the same thing. It's like I can give it to the government, or I can buy something for the channel.
Yeah. And you buy something for the channel, and then you can make the videos off of that, and that's a whole different subculture. But you don't always get that until you get into the business for a while, and you start really seeing the stuff and start understanding of what's going on with the market and what makes sense for a YouTube standpoint. Yeah.
And going back to your kind of your turbocharged comments, I think, I'm not cut and dry on turbos or non-turbos. I do think that it's very tough to make a turbocharged vehicle as reliable long-term, like a 10 to 20 year period, where you see a lot of these, these Toyota 4.7s that are still on the road that are actually going up in value now, because everybody's like, I'll go buy an old Lexus, and it's got the timing. It's just easy to, I'll put 500,000 miles on it and I won't buy another car again. And there are people like that.
Yeah.
But looking at the newer cars, it seems dumb to say, but because 4 cylinders are so frowned upon, from a reliability perspective, I look at the design of a 4 cylinder versus a V6 twin turbo in almost any company. And I would take that 4-cylinder turbo with a single turbo, much simpler timing chain configuration. You don't have the tensioner problems. You don't have multiple chains that are going around multiple cam phasers. And it's just so simple to have a 4-cylinder inline 4 or an inline 6 like the Duramax with, a single turbo, and easier to work on. You don't have to necessarily yank the whole thing out of the truck to work on it to replace a turbo down the road or something. So I think, yeah, I get the you lose the V8 rumble, but torque's there. Like in the GM27, you can struggle to find people that have had failures online with those, and they've sold more of those probably than anything else.
I tell people all the time, like, have you driven one? That's my response.
Yeah.
Because when you go to drive one, and I've said that I think the conversation about cylinders is kind of over, right? Now it's about what torque and what RPMs. It doesn't matter 4-cylinder or 6-cylinder. Sometimes a 4-cylinder could be designed in such a way with turbos that it mimics a V8 and mimics a 6-cylinder, right? So I think the conversation about cylinders is a little bit old school, and I think we need to look at engine design and what torque what RPM is going to come out at, because you can get a 4-cylinder that freaking flies, and you can tune it to fly, and you're like, holy cow, how's this 4-cylinder? Other times, I've been in different Toyota vehicles. I did the Land Cruiser versus the Lexus GX. It's a 4-cylinder versus 6-cylinder. It does make a difference towing. It just depends on the overall engine setup. I own that Duramax you're talking about for a year, and I've done several videos on it, and it's phenomenal that I got 30 miles per gallon out of a full-size truck.
Yeah.
Like, I go back to my granddad, I can buy a full-size truck at 30 miles per gallon. He will never believe me in his life, because back then in the 70s and 80s, you did 30 miles per gallon, engine yanked out, going downhill with a tow sled. I mean, you never got that fuel economy.
Yeah.
And having the power and the torque and having the fuel economy is exceptional these days. And and I tell people I have a 62 C10 outside, and I always get people stop by the house, and we talked to. I'm a small community here, but you go to the gas station, the guy knows where I live. It's the situation that comes out to, because that's new vehicles in the parking lot all the time. And I call my parking lot, which is my side yard, with rock. And so, people are like, it's 62 C10. You can hop in the engine bay and work on it. I said, yeah, but in that versus my new RHO or my Duramax or my Tundra or my Ford, when I had that as well, I don't have to work on new trucks. I have to work on my 62.
Yeah.
Because I had a fuel line pop off. I had a fuel injection now. It doesn't always work right, or there's always something going on with those old trucks. And I'm like, I was growing up in Michigan, reliability was 100,000 miles, man. That vehicle was dead. It was gone. Frame rusted out. Engine was toast. I mean, it just, that's how we viewed things. And now it's like, I had somebody said to me the other day, they're like, this turbocharged truck won't last 300,000 miles. 300,000 miles? Are you kidding me? 10,000 miles, 15,000 miles a year? What are you looking at? 30 years? That'd be awesome.
Yeah. And I think there was a sweet spot. Like, you go from what you're talking about, those older trucks that they required a lot more maintenance. And then once you got into, man, even the 90s, like mid 90s, we have on my stepdad's ranch, like, he's got 2 or 3 older 90s Chevys. One of them's a 454 with a 5-speed stick.
The big block.
And it's got, and you replace the suspension every once in a while. It's a plow truck, does everything. And they just work, you know what problems they're going to have, and you can fix them. He has a diesel that's the same model. And then he's got like a 2014 Chevy with the 6-liter there's no AFM. Right. And dead simple, reliable, just no problems, other than, you got all the electrical problems, the interior problems, all the other stuff. But the truck's going to go down the road with the check engine light on. That's a Chevy. And
it is for sure.
Yeah. And those old, so there's like this sweet spot, and Toyota was the same way, where you could, from, that 90s to kind of the 2015 era, I feel like, there wasn't a lot of tech. They weren't chasing direct injection yet, like BMW. They were kind of just port injection, simple, no high pressure fuel pumps. Everything's chain driven, and everything was pretty reliable. And I think part of it is because they're so simple, right? There was not, you didn't have all the electronic sensors in your rear lights, all the, the radar sensors,
Yep.
the 500 computers in your car now versus maybe 10 back then. But they still were safe. It was like that sweet spot of they were still kind of safe enough with the airbags. They still rode, nice enough. They were smooth riding, had enough power. They weren't turbocharged, but like my 5.7 in my Toyota, it's not going to rip around like a new Tundra. But I get in that thing, and we, my family and I have been across the country in it multiple times, to Florida, to California, and it's got 234,000. And it's just like, every time I get in it, I have zero doubt that it's just going to start and go. It's just like, it sounds the same. It runs the same as a brand new 5.7. It's just, and I think we've lost that. I don't know that we're going to see that again. Maybe it'll be, maybe it'll come back and they'll get back to what I think got Toyota there. But I do think a lot of that corporate just kind of penny pinching has started to bite them a little bit.
Yeah, it's interesting. I talk to engineers all the time in my role as my job, and they love the older trucks. Like they love working on trucks. I mean, they love a lot of those guys are on their backsides in Michigan in winter wrenching on trucks, right? So they get it. They would love to make things simpler. They would love to reduce stuff. There's several pieces of that, right? So you have some government regulations from a global standpoint.
Yep.
One of the things that people don't realize with Toyota specifically is that they're a global company. And so they can't build something in the United States. They have to build it for all the markets across the world. And that's how they think. So they have those concerns. There's also the concerns about, from a corporate standpoint, Toyota has been very adamant about, greenhouse gases and emissions. And I grew up in the 70s and 80s. And I remember watching Pittsburgh Steelers football, and you couldn't see Three River Stadium from the blimp. I mean, it was all smog. I mean, nobody wants to go back there, right? So there's definitely a sweet spot between the air quality being good right now and how much further we can go. I have concerns about how much further we're going to go, because I think things are pretty good right now. I think we're in a good spot, and maybe just slow down a little bit. But the new customer now, though. There's a new customer that doesn't want to check the oil. They don't want to change oil filters. They don't want to look at the air filters. They want to get it and they want to rip, right? So it's kind of the Tesla effect that's happened to gas vehicles. They think things are slow. They want things to be simple and easy. They don't want to mess with stuff. And I think there's a lot of customers that are that way. And so you're trying to build this vehicle to the 95th percentile, which means you're going to lose out on certain percentage of people that don't want that stuff. I remember guys were telling me a couple years ago they want a truck with roll-up windows and manual locks.
Yep.
And Ford offered that for years. And I remember going to the Ford dealerships, and I remember going to Ford corporate and asking them what this package was. And they said, well, the dealers said, we don't order it anymore. We don't even try.
Yeah.
Because even the fleet customers are going, I want my guys to have roll-up window or power windows. I want them to have a USB plug for their phone. They wanted that. And so Ford, it was funny because Ford killed that package, and the prices went up. People are like, oh my God, F-150 is more expensive. And I'm like, no, the reality is they're just pricing it for what people are actually buying now, not what they aspirated to buy in the past. And so the market's interesting, because for every one guy I get that says, I want a natural aspirated V8, I have another guy that emails me and he wants to know, would I choose the Silverado EV RST first edition versus the Sierra Denali EV first edition? Yeah. And I'm like, you're talking about $140,000 trucks or whatever it is in this crazy the EV world. And they want to know which one I would choose. And so it's tough because the truck market has become so wide. Yeah. And it's great too, right? So the Ford Maverick came around and we got a whole new audience, and Honda Ridgeline came around. We had no whole new audience. And so it's great talking this whole big group of people that didn't exist before.
Yeah. Yeah. I had an EV for a while, and they're really nice for putzing around town and getting the groceries or whatever. I don't think in cold weather climates like we're at in Colorado and other places, I don't think they're going to replace trucks anytime soon unless battery technology takes just a massive leap forward. Just the charging infrastructure for like towing, you know, if you're just towing, if I'm just going to my, you know, relatives 4.5 hours away over I-70 and it's going up to 11,000 feet. It's like you tow anything there and it's going to be like an 8-hour trip or a 6-hour trip. And, you know, they're nice. It's just, they're not, the cost for an EV without the subsidies is just still massive. And I don't think, given the country's debt and just where the government is with showing all, you know, the most recent stuff with all the spending, and then if tariffs do come up, man, without subsidies, I don't see how EVs could compete for a while with gas vehicles if they kind of remove the restrictions and allow us to get gas going again in this country. Could be wrong, but they might still just keep pushing it. You know, there's a lot of people, a lot of politicians invested in those battery companies. So
yeah, I mean, well, you're losing billions. I mean, that's Ford CEO said the other day. Once tariffs go through, once you kill stuff, I mean, because the thing is, like, there's communities that have increased all these jobs based around battery plants, and so there's a it's not such a simple answer as most things are. As you get older, you will start realizing most things aren't as simple as you used to be, right? So it just things have changed, and I think there'll be a lot with the extended range EVs. You know, Ram's talking about theirs, and Ford's talking about doing as well. It makes sense. Small engine plus a battery, you get lots of range, you get the torque, you put the gas in. It just seems like it's that sweet spot for consumers. It does add more complexity because now you have an engine plus you have a battery to maintain. There's more complexity there. Which what invariably will happen was you'll get one or two that'll fail, and then it becomes all big news. And it's like, it's a game of statistics too, right? So, I mean, you have, you know, Ford builds 400,000 trucks every year at F-Series trucks. And at some point, they're going to about 5% of those are going to fail off the line just because that's statistics. That's what's going to happen. And it sucks because I hate to be the person that has those. Although I will tell you from a YouTube standpoint, I hope I have problems. Because that is massive, right? You've seen that. I hope I have problems because it's like, holy crap, people watch all those videos with problems.
Yeah. It's like there's so many different reasons why people watch those videos. Some people are researching and they're just not wanting to buy the next big problem. And then other people are, you know, they're not going to buy a new truck and they're just like, I told you. Right. You know, it depends on the camp, but it draws in a lot of people and they love commenting on it. And it's a big draw.
And YouTube, you know, comments cause engagement causes the videos to go viral, and there you go.
Yeah. And if you have like a GM guy and a Ford guy and a Toyota guy, and you know, they've all got friends that own different brands. So then one guy's going to see a video and be like, hey buddy, check this video out on your truck. You know, like it's kind of a little dig, you know, just playing with each other. I think that happens a lot, and that's probably why those do so well. The materials, I know you mentioned the materials too. I was going to ask you about your Tundra. Did you think, because I've read and talked to other people that had lemon law buybacks on those Tundras, and they complained about just the weirdest things, like even just the door handles, kind of like when you shut the door hard, just felt like it wasn't even attached as tight as the old Tundra did. It just, everything didn't feel as solid. And I wonder if it's truly the build quality was lower. I mean, I've seen TRD John talk about that as well, or if it's just the cost goes up. So then, you know, what humans tend to do is we scrutinize a lot harder. Like if I used to pay 45 and now I'm paying 55 or 60, I'm going to be a lot more picky, you know, like, okay, I'm stretching a little bit. But if anything's wrong with it, now I'm going to complain. Whereas before, maybe I got an invoice deal on something in 2017 or 18, and it's like I lived with some of the material issues.
It's interesting. So I did 1,000, not 1,000, but I feel like 1,000 videos in that Tundra, and I went through materials. I went through everything. I went through a lot of different things, and I have friends with many engineers who, for a period of time, didn't talk to me. Frankly, they didn't want to talk to me because I'm not a good poker player. I don't hide things. And what I say, sometimes I need to edit my videos closer because I say some stuff on camera that probably isn't as fair as it should be. And I'm known as one of the more critical people. When I go to events, I always get introduced to the engineers going, this guy, you sit with this guy's very critical. And so I end up sitting at press events, they have tables set up and they have little stickers for people. And I end up sitting next to chief engineers all the time because we have conversations, because there's things that I don't like and I can't stand. The 2022 Tundra was just a great vehicle for me to get into, because I had a 2013 Tundra. So I'd owned 2013 for 4 or 5 years, and I finally sold it because it actually got kind of dumb. And this doesn't make sense to people, but I had gotten big enough in my career that I had enough press loans outside, and it sat outside on the driveway for like 6-7 months at a time, sitting there. And I'm making these payments on this thing sitting there, and from a business standpoint, it got dumb. And so I sold it, and then I moved on to different things. But I did not like the 2020. I don't like their Gen Tundra. I really, I feel like I bought the limited. I feel like if I had bought a platinum, maybe I'd be a little more happy, because I never loved the Fu Manchu looking front end of it. It just didn't sit with me. I really had problems with the seat cracking on the trim. I kind of broke that. One of the people that broke the story. Numerous people did the story. I'm not going to claim credit for that. I really didn't like the weather stripping not meeting the rear doors. I actually made a point of talking to the new Tacoma engineer about that at the launch, and he was very adamant about how it made the change in the Tacoma to put a piece of plastic, just a big piece of plastic, the trim. So if you don't know, there's weather stripping on the rear doors of Tundra that comes around, and there's a gap right where you grab the door handle, and it sits in your mind, this gap about, I'm going to say, a half inch. And so I just drove me nuts. It felt unfinished to me. And so the Tacoma now has a big piece of plastic that goes over top of that basically makes it look, it's molded, looks good. It looks like it's a finished product. I didn't have the center console issue that TRD John had. I didn't have the wind noise he had. But my wife and I got to the point where we just didn't drive it, actually. And I ended up selling it because we just didn't like it. And I didn't like the decisions they made. I mean, I remember talking to chief engineer Mike Swears about this, and he was like, well, I said, why didn't you do power in the bed like the Ford did? You have a hybrid, give me power in the bed. In my opinion, if I have to go hybrid, give me more capability, right? So when I bought the Power Boost in 21, I don't give a crap about hybrid in the truck. I don't care about fuel economy. It's not my big issue. But if I have 7.2 kilowatts of power back there, I can weld on the back of my truck. That's a useful tool. That's something I can use to do stuff. And he said to me that he talked to his construction guys, his buddies, and they didn't need it. And I said, well, you guys sell like 2 trucks a year to commercial operators. Your market's consumers, and consumers have needs in a ranch or things that they would go around the ranch, want to fix fence, whatever. It's nice to have be able to plug in a reciprocating saw and actually cut something.
Yeah.
And I did a video on that because the Tacoma has the same plug, and it's crazy to me that the Toyota Sienna has more power in the bed than the Tacoma or Tundra has. Yeah, it's like a freaking minivan's got more power, and he didn't like that at all. So I just had my issues with it, and I just felt like there was things I think they did well. Like I've always thought that Toyota does a good job with the power, with the underneath the skin, right? I think the powertrain, I think the frame, I think the engineering there is fine. I have concerns about the design. I have concerns about the interior layout. They actually changed the infotainment screen and the system based on my feedback, because I know those guys. And it's funny, I'd called my friend who's in charge of that. He's a friend now. I've known him for 10 years. That's what happens, right? He's not a friend, but I've done 10 years with this guy. And I called him one day, and he says, oh, yeah, he goes, Tim, everybody in their office of infotainment systems knows who you are. That was the response I got, because I didn't like it. I want a home button, damn it. I don't understand why I don't have a home button. Yeah. And I've been in the second. I didn't ever own this. Somebody said, did I ever own a second gen Tundra? I never owned a second gen Tundra. I've been in second gen Tundras, but I felt like it was unfinished product. I didn't like it, and they didn't talk to me for a while, to be frank with you. I felt like it was a combination of things, right? So a little bit of a build quality issue. As far as I don't know that people in the plants were building them wrong. I've been to San Antonio 2 or 3 times now. Those people have a lot of pride. And so I'm always cognizant of calling out the line worker. I have friends in Flint, Michigan I grew up with who are on the lines. They don't they don't walk around and go, I'm going to put this bolt in half-ass.
Yeah.
None of those guys do that stuff. They have a lot of pride in what they're doing. And so when I talk about build quality, I think about like paint blemishes. I think of like of fitment of the panels not fitting right.
Yeah.
When I think of the design, that's where I have a problem with. I remember when the Nissan Titan came out, it was a spirited event at the press launch for that because they almost threw me out because I had so many problems with that truck. The heated seat button being all the way in the passenger side next to his leg, or heated steering wheel, excuse me, drove me nuts. And so I brought these issues up with them, and they didn't fix it, and Titan's dead. So I guess one for me apparently. But I have those issues. I don't understand why they do those things because it's not a penny pinching issue. They spent the money on it. It's not an engineering issue because the engineering is pretty good. It's a design issue. It's the picking materials. And the thing that people don't understand is that Toyota, like most manufacturers, 95% of the employees are in the plants. Engineering team is very small. The interior design team is very small, and exterior design is very small. And so if you get somebody in a role that maybe I don't agree with, you're looking at 6, 7, 8 vehicles in a row that can be designed the same way.
Yeah. I doubt I'll get invited to any of those events anytime soon, so I don't have to. I'll just ask you how it goes and get some info.
So I think that's part of the issue that comes up a lot of times. I get in conversations where there's a lot of unknowns about my job, right? There's a lot of like smoke and mirrors behind the scenes. Am I taking money? Am I doing this and doing that? Whatever. And I will tell you that I don't. I wish I did. I wish I got paid. It would make my life a lot easier from a business standpoint. But there are events that I lose money on. So, like for example, the Lexus, where is that? San Francisco. 2 weeks ago, Lexus LX 700H hybrid system. The vehicle is just a hybrid. It's the same as LX 600 hybrid. And I said to the team there, I said, if I make $30 on this, I'm gonna be great, and I'm already gonna lose $300-400 by being here. And they're like, "How do you mean that? How do you mean we flew you in? We did a hotel." I'm like, "Yeah, great. I have another freaking hotel room that I'm never gonna enjoy. Another flight. At my stage in a career, it's a silver tube in the air, right? So I mean, and for me, it's 3 hours driving to Denver, hopping a plane, flying all day, flying in there, having dinner, having drinks next day, and I didn't go. I just felt so crappy. I didn't go to dinner that night, and then flying back home the next day. So what happens at press events is that depending where you live, and I live in a really bad area, which is where Jill works for me, is really great. She's right next to Chicago O'Hare. So she's like 10 minutes from O'Hare. So it's simple for her to fly. But for me, it's a 3.5 hour drive. By the time I leave my house to the front door of the plane, it's like 4 hours by the time I park the car at Scottsdale, 180 miles. And so I lose a full day in the office. 3 days, actually, because I have the day I'm gone. The day I'm there, I'm losing in the office, and the day I come home because I'm gone 3 days. So, and there's a lot of times I can make more money doing auto news stories than I can at the event. And then you fly in, you typically have maybe an hour or two to yourself. If that, you have dinner, which is usually 30-40 people. You're talking. That's kind of the benefit I get from you talking to my colleagues. TRD John at the Foreigner event showed me a trick with my camera that could make my life a lot easier. So those are really beneficial things you can't get. You go to dinner, you have drinks if you want to. Usually in bed by 10:30. Breakfast is at 6 to 7. You have there's a quick like walk around the vehicle by 7 to 8. You're on the road by 8:15. You drive a couple hours to the Toyota does a lot of spoken hub things. Spoken hub means that we drive 7 or 8 Lexus vehicles to a spot. We park them. You take turns driving them. You make your content. You do an off-road trip, whatever. You have lunch. That's basically whenever you want to. Just like a spread, or usually they serve you at a restaurant, whatever. A one-on-one. You do that. You can talk to. Most times there's marketing there. Sometimes there's a chief engineer. In the Lexus event, they send in from the chief engineers from Japan. I don't always like interviewing those guys because it's tough to make a video out of that. And it's not to be rude with those guys, but you're asking questions to the translator. Translator's trying to translate to them, and the video just looks kind of weird. And then by 3:00, the event's over. You're done. That's it. You head back to the hotel. You take a quick shower or whatever you got to do. You emails, whatever. You have dinner, your drinks. Next morning at sometimes 5:30 in the morning, 6 o'clock morning, you're on a shuttle back to the airport. You fly home. So that's what the events are. And so you film as much as you possibly can, and you
Yep.
try to do the best you can to make as much money as you can, because you're out 3 days. Now there are times like the Lexus LX 600, for some reason that video took off, 265,000 views or something, and frankly, I have no flipping clue why. And you know this with YouTube. All of a sudden, you're like, "Oh, people like that video," and then you do another one just like it, and guess what? Nobody watches it. You're like, "What the hell happened?" You know? And so you're always kind of rolling the dice. You're always trying to say, "Well, maybe I can make money this video, maybe I don't." And there's times I've turned down channels because, or turned down trips because it just doesn't make sense. You know, it doesn't make sense to do the trip. I know I can't make money out of that. And so the trips are always funny because, like I said, I think part of it's jealousy. I quit taking photos and publishing them on social media, like taking photos and putting them on Instagram and Facebook and things, because it created a bunch of jealousy. People always like ask me how much the room was, how much this was, how much that was. And I was like, I don't even know. I mean, at some point it gets stupid. I actually last summer got into it a lot with my colleagues. So they argued about, like, let's just stay at a Holiday Inn, and they got all pissy at me. And it turns out it's not about us. It's about the VP of that company. He wants to show you an experience. He wants to put you in the role. Like, we went to Napa Valley. Well, that's where the Lexus LX customer is. They wanted you to be in the same area that customer would buy that vehicle, which makes sense because then you get in the mindset of that customer while you're there, which is helpful in doing a video. But that's why they do those things.
Yeah, I've talked to at least one other YouTuber that felt like, I don't know if that's what other people feel like or if you feel like that, but they felt like their tongues being tied a little bit. Like, they might invite someone to an event, but if you're too critical in certain areas publicly, then they're not going to tell you what to say, but the invites might not come back in the future. And I've talked to a couple people that had invites and then now don't have invites because of just being slightly critical of things. And I don't know if that's really how they kind of control. I think that's the general feeling in the public anyway, of people that aren't there. And it sounds like that's probably what they're going to do, because they're putting people up in hotels and they're maybe paying for flights. So it's like, well, you're not really there to answer questions about how reliable the one was 2 years ago. You're just there to talk about the new features and promote the new one. And so from their perspective, it's all like they just want it to be all positive. But although negativity doesn't seem to have hurt the Tundra at all, it's still got record sales. So I think it's the old, bad press is still good press type thing with the Tundra.
So I've been through this quite a bit, and I've talked to many different PR people. There's two sides of this coin, right? So my friend at Out of Spec Studios, blanking on his name at the moment. I can see his face. Anyways, he's done a couple overly negative videos on the Dodge Charger, and that's fine. And I've been negative on certain videos as well, in certain vehicles. The problem I run into is that, does negativity really help anybody, right? So if you completely shit on a product, absolutely, that's not really helpful. And that's why when I do things, I talk to them like, hey, there's things I like, things I don't like. Because when I do my 5 good things, 5 bad things videos, for example, nobody cares about the good things. I can see it in my timeline, right? The view duration. Nobody, and then all of a sudden, bad things, right? And I've talked to PR people about this all the time, and they tell me all the time that they'd rather have me there because I'm fair. I can talk about good things and bad things. They can fix the bad things. But if you go full on negative about the entire vehicle the entire time, well, that's not really helpful. And from my standpoint, if I tell you the Tundra is terrible, right? I'm saying the engineering's terrible. I'm saying the manufacturing's terrible. Marketing's terrible. Leadership's terrible. The suppliers are terrible. Well, God, are they really all that bad? Like, am I telling you all these people are terrible? And how does that help people, right? But if I said, hey, there's an opportunity here to improve the product by doing this, I find automakers more receptive to that, because especially things like small things, like if infotainment system on the Tundra, for example, I had many small things that get fixed. They did, right? Because you can't change a multi-million-dollar program because you don't like the way the door handle closes.
Yeah.
It doesn't really do anything, right? But if you go to him and say, you know, I really don't like the way this does or that does, and I think he's probably done it a little differently. Engineering is very receptive to that. So the people that have gone to events and all they do is they completely crap on the product, yeah, they don't get invited to buy it because they have no value. And it's not about the fact they were negative or they're overly positive. I've seen people in my business, for example, Kyle Connor, thank you, Dougie, that have said that the vehicle's awesome. All they do is talk about how awesome it is. Those people don't get invited either. Those people don't come back because what's the benefit of those people?
Yeah.
They're not helpful. It doesn't. People, I think that's the viewpoint is if you're not critical, you don't get invited back. Well, that's not so accurate. If you're overly positive, you don't get invited back either because there's no benefit there as well.
Yeah.
I think it goes both sides, but also there's a whole. When you get into the industry and you start meeting people in the auto shows and things, you start realizing there's a lot of different viewpoints out there, and what you may not like, somebody else may like, or back and forth. And then when you go to these events, like for example, I did the Ram Hurricane drive. Okay, the new, whatever the vehicle's there, and I'm sorry, I've been doing this a long time. I'm just, the glam and glamour is over for me. It's great. We're in a great area with palm trees, fantastic, great, whatever. I have a job to do. I don't give a flying crap where we're at. We could be in Alaska in the snowstorm. I don't care. I have a job to do. I have to make money. I have to report on this. I have to create a video people want to watch. I have to be fair to my audience. I have a job to do, and so I go there. They won't talk about the Hemi, excuse me. The Hurricane is out. They don't talk Hemi. So you can't go to these events and sit in the engineer and say, what's up with the Hemi tick? Because that's past, right? They don't talk about those problems either. I've never had a Ram engineer, and I've known guys for a decade now that will tell me about the Hemi tick and explain it to me in a way that makes sense, right? They may at the bar a little bit later at night when the PR guy went to bed, but you really don't get that stuff until at the events because they're always moving forward. And so I think a lot of customers will say, I wish they'd fix this, and this in the Tundra before I buy one. And it's like, why didn't they fix that stuff? Well, they're already, the engineering team is already 3 vehicles forward. I think that's the misnomer, is that the Tundra engineering team that designed 22 Tundra went to the Sequoia, went to the 4Runner, went to the Tacoma, went to Lexus GX, went to Lexus LX, and now back to the Tundra. They don't work on these vehicles all the time, and so they don't have it. They don't always go back, and some of those guys retire. Some of those guys change companies, and so you don't really know. You can't get a good answer, and that's the frustrating part I have, and a frustrating part I think you have as a viewer, that people have, is like, did they fix XYZ problem? And I can't tell you because can't talk to anybody who knows, because he went to Ram and then that guy went to GM and that guy retired and that guy's knowing the company. You don't get a straight answer.
Yeah. And Toyota, they really did with a lot of their products. I think they set this standard so high of, where people were routinely getting 300 to 500,000 half the time, neglecting their vehicles. I mean, I know people that didn't change their diff and transmission fluid and they'd have 380,000 on their 4Runner. And I'm like, how did it get there? Right. And they're just like, just oil changes, whatever. It's cast iron diffs and it's good to go. So I think that standard is set. And then Toyota's, I think they made a mistake. I mean, not sales wise, they've been selling the crap out of everything, but I think they made a mistake of trying to do all of them at once. It felt like everything was at once. It was just like, let's go to this it wasn't just, we're going to release new vehicles and new powertrains. It was ground up. The frame's new, the suspension's new, everything's new. The brakes are new. I mean, the brakes squeal. My daughter's Camry, she backs out. I can hear it howling in my bedroom. It's like, wakes up the neighbors. It's a 2018, and I know TRD John's complained about that. Like, come on, I got this $50,000 SUV, and I'm backing out, and he's embarrassed a little bit. He's like trying to feather it, little stuff like that. They changed every part of it, and they'll work out the kinks. It's just, it was so much to take on, every platform, and ground up changes. I think that was man, that was really ambitious, and it bit them a little bit.
Yeah,
And
sure.
hopefully they'll just work it out and be like what they used to do. What really got them that reliability crown is saying we're going to use this reliable powertrain and this transmission, and that's going to go in like 10 different cars for 10 years or 12 years or whatever. And everything can change around it a little bit, maybe some facelifts, but we're not going to drastically change things. And I think if they can do that with this new platform in the cars and the trucks, then it'll probably be fine. It's just taking them longer to get fine than it used to.
Toyota is going through a moment for sure.
Yeah.
There's no argument there. I will tell you from a journalist standpoint and from talking to customers, there are a lot of customers like you that love the reliability of those vehicles, and that was their primary focus. But driving them back to back, they were so far behind.
Yeah.
They were light years behind. And so they chose to catch up, which whenever any business, right, you decide to catch up the competition in various ways, you just can't anticipate all the problems that you had in prior. You just can't. It's just, you're gonna have issues. And so I know from having a 2013 Tundra, driving a second gen Tundra, I've driven every Tundra since 2014, and driving through the years. I mean, towards the end of that second gen Tundra's life, it was almost comical how it didn't stack up to competition. And that was from a journalist standpoint. And also I had customers tell me this too, that especially what happened was when Ram launched their 2019 Ram 1500 with the big screen, that was so earth shattering at the moment. Tesla had done it before. Tesla had created this whole thing before. It was so earth shattering. I remember GM had launched at the same time, and GM thought they would win Truck of the Year, Motor Trend, and all the kind of awards. And I don't care about awards, but they're going to win these awards. And they were shocked of how much customers went to Ram and how sales boomed, right? I remember in a press conference in Chicago, Bob Heblum, he's a big guy. And Bob was on stage talking about the Ram Laramie Longhorn. And I walked up to him afterwards. I said, I didn't know if you're describing a truck or a Chanel handbag. I mean, my goodness, the features in this vehicle were insane. Yeah. And Toyota had no response to that. And I think they really felt like they're behind the game, and they really were at that point, at that moment. And looking back on it, and I know customers were like, the diehards didn't care about that stuff. They wanted something to last all these 100,000 miles. The big three have had sketchy reliability at best at times. They've had a lot of times issues. But now you have this new customer base that's coming in that doesn't remember that stuff. And they don't want to buy their dad's Ford. They don't want to buy their dad drove Ford. I'm not buying a Ford. I'm buying something else because I don't like that, whatever. But and we have kids, and we know kids want to always push our buttons. And so I think that was the big change. I think they will get back to that as far as reliability goes because they made the big changes. It'll be interesting to see what works out in the next 5, 6, 8 years. Because I think with the Tundra, for me, it's the small things. Tow hooks. Yeah. Novel idea. Seat doesn't crack. Novel idea. The weather stripping hits. Complete. Not a bed. The bed, when you drop the tailgate, you can hop in the bed. It doesn't round off the corners. Yeah. I remember sitting with the chief designer in a hotel in LA or something like that. And he was talking about how the bed, and I looked at this guy and he's wearing like white pants and boat shoes. And I'm like, you don't understand trucks at all. I was so mad, and I had to basically get up and leave because you drop the bed and there's no way to get in the bed. And I'm like, it's ridiculous. And they applauded that. And so I think they took it on the chin. I think they really did take it on the chin. And I know the engineers are actually I shouldn't tell the story, but when the Tacoma came out, Sheldon Brown was chief engineer, and Mike Spears is his boss, and Mike's a legend in the industry, been for many years. And Sheldon walked over to Tacoma and grabbed a hook and goes, "Hey, look, Mike, I have a tow hook." And that really grated at Mike because Mike wanted tow hooks. That's the thing. It's like engineering wants tow hooks, but you have to remember that Toyota is a very conservative company. And globally, they've passed crash standards. And so while GM and Ford and Ram can pass crash standards with the tow hooks in the front, Toyota looks at everything on a global scale and global crash standards. And the safety team overruled the engineering team. And I will tell you that there was a lot of beer drinking that night and a lot of frustrations and hands on the wall, because I know a lot of Toyota engineers and they hate that. It drives them up a wall, and there's a lot of passion there. That's where I get a little defensive when people like call out things about like engineers aren't doing this or doing that. Like, I know a lot of engineers who would go, would take you to the mat and wrestle you all day long about that stuff, because they take a lot of pride in their work. I've never met an engineer to this day who doesn't care about their vehicle. They care mightily about it.
Yeah, you could see that in, General Motors engineer for the 2.7. That guy was just pumped telling Andre about, the forged lower end. And I mean, he was just so into it. You could tell it was 5 years of his life designing it.
Oh, yeah.
So
that guy was funny. I had him on I had a Duramax, and I was talking about fuel, and because they have a stupid spec in the manual, it says you have to use top tier diesel. And I had Kevin, this is his name, Kevin, had him on a video, and I said, so Kevin, what fuel do I use in this? And he just smirked because he had seen my video, and he was like, all right, and he made some great comment about it. But yeah, I mean, when you go to events, one of the benefits I have is I go to events, and I'll see Andre there, and Andre and I'll have a beer, and we'll talk about things, whatever. I'll have whiskey, has beer, and we'll talk about things, whatever. And we're competitors and colleagues. It's just how things work out. But every once in a while, I'll get an engineer there, and I love the engineers when they show up, and especially for me, I love picking on the brains and stuff, and they watch our stuff. Like, I can tell you right now, there's probably 157 people watching tomorrow's replay. There'll be at least 10 engineers from Ram, GM, and Ford, and Toyota watching this replay. And they watch all this stuff. And if they're not watching this, they have an agency that comes out and watches all the videos. Like, I'll tell you this right now, you have a portfolio in every automaker's.
Oh, book. That's great.
Yep, you do. I mean, they do. They're on forums because they want to know, right? And the thing is, they don't want to know about. Again, going back to my point, they don't want to know about what's good. They want to know what customers complain about, because they can fix customers' complaints.
Yeah.
They can't make good better. They can fix customers' complaints. They're watching everything. And so, you go to these events, and these engineers sit down with you, and they're deer in the headlights, because they're like, oh my God, I've seen like 15-year videos. I've seen those stuff, and they want to argue about stuff. And so every once in a while I'll be there, and TFL had done something, or I'll have done something, and engineers and they'll make snide comments like, yeah, what about this? What about that? And you can tell that they were engaged, and they were watching, and they want, so the engineers want to talk to you. PR doesn't want them to talk.
Yeah.
And it makes sense, right? Because there's a lot of liability and legal issues and things. But the engineers, I mean, they funny story. We did the Ram 6.7 liter Cummins, and I'm sorry, I talk a lot, and interrupt me whenever you want to. I did the Ram 6.7 Cummins, and I remember his name. Anyways, we did this video, and I talked to him a week afterwards. I happened to get the chance to talk to him a week afterwards, which is kind of rare in my business. And we're talking about the lifters. So the Hemi had, the Cummins, the fuel pump was an issue. The CP4 was a big issue. We went back to CP3. I think my terminology may be wrong, and I knew that. And so I asked that question, which is, I'm learning, right? But I didn't know there was a lifters issue with that Cummins. And him and I were talking about this, and he goes, I saw the comments. All your comments were lifters. And he says, okay. I said, we want to talk about this. He goes, I'm not ready yet. I said, I appreciate that, because it's he has to go to Cummins. Cummins has to go back to him. He's got to go research it. There's a lot of pieces involved. So we're going to talk about this again. And the first press drive, I'll probably be there, and we'll have a conversation just about lifters. But it's based on the fact that he read the comments, interviewed the Ram director of national sales, and he read the comment. I published a video. He watched in his bedroom, his hotel bed. He's watching the video, reading the comments. So if I tell people all the time, like, if you want people to get spotlighted your issue, comment. Yeah, comment, because they will read this stuff. Yeah. And they will they'll take some back, and they'll take not back, because agreeably, there's way too much commenting these days in any world. But yeah, they read this stuff all the time.
Yeah, I think the engineers' hands are tied, unfortunately, when you see, I probably won't ever take my channel in a way that is just buying new vehicles. And I mean, I do buy new vehicles, and I'll talk about them, but I'm not going to just be overly positive, or I don't even care about getting invited to the events because I have a day job and I'm like, whatever.
Trust me, it's not all cracked up to be.
Yeah, it would be nice to have early access, but at the same time, for whatever reason, I'm just more interested in looking at what does the data say after a certain period of time when I'm looking at and aggregating it all. And since there's really no good source of, I don't feel like there's a good source of truth. NHTSA, all these places, they're really just a tiny little sliver of the real data that's out there. Like you said, people commenting and people in forums or Facebook groups, and forums have been around since the 90s. And
Yeah.
it's just interesting to see where all the data kind of flows in and how long it takes the manufacturers to really react to the data, but you can kind of see trends a lot earlier than they react to or they're forced to react to. So I will probably always take that approach with the channel of more like a consumer advocacy approach of, hey, I'm going to be super hard on them because I think wet oil pump belts are the dumbest idea I've ever heard in my life. And I will just die on that hill. Like I could have an engineer tell me they're better and stronger. And I know that a chain is going to last 20 or 25 years. And I believe just intuitively that the only reasons they did that were to cut cost and weight. And it's not necessarily in the engineer's control. I can almost guarantee you no engineer wants to put a Kevlar belt on a turbocharged engine.
I can tell you the engineer was really pissed about it.
Yeah.
And I've had conversations with him about that, and we've done conversations online and offline. And offline's always better than online. He was really pissed, and it came down to not a cost issue. He wanted a chain. The problem came down to MVH. So the product planners had researched the marketplace, and they had a spec that was built on to how much sound in the cabin there was, and a chain by design and by the chain makes more noise. And so he did. I will tell you, he pulled his hair out and did everything he possibly could to use a chain because he wanted a chain really badly, and he is very frustrated about it. But it wasn't a money issue. It wasn't saving money because he was like, a chain and a belt, same cost. It doesn't matter to me. I don't give a crap about that. He goes, I want to. That was his engine. I want to make this thing last forever. Like, I want to make sure it's bulletproof, lasts forever. That's his viewpoint on that. But it was NVH, and he was like, look, he said to me in the video on one of the videos we published, he goes, I can't get past this. I can't get around it. I'd love to tell you that it's a foolproof thing, whatever. But he goes, I can't get past you. He said, now I will tell you that belts do last longer than they used to. Right? It's not. Remember movies back in the 70s when the belt would. The timing belt would break, and the guy would get out and take his belt off his pants, and he'd put it on there, and they'd make the belt run again, right? Remember those movies? He goes, those days are gone. Those days don't exist anymore. But he goes, yeah. I can tell you the belts have really improved, and we see, and from his standpoint, he goes, we see belt failure lasting 200,000, 300,000 miles. He goes, it doesn't even matter. He goes, I'd love to get past that. I think you'd be fascinated if you got into the business a little more because I've been to the best things are the engine testing facilities. Those are the best. So what they do is they take a new engine, and understandably that engines and product development are on different schedules, and suppliers different schedules. So you have a lot of missed pieces going on. But so they come with the Hurricane engine, for example. Hurricane engine came out a couple years ago, but probably 2 years before that, they were already designing for this, right? So automakers work in 8 to 12-year segments. They don't work in 4-year segments. They work in long period. So what they do, and this is really cool, they take the engine, they put an engine stand, they in the building, tech center building kind of deal, everything's gray walls and like tan ceilings and stuff. Engineering buildings are just terrible. But they have this room that's sound deadening, and they hook up gasoline to this with a massive tank, like 5,000 gallon tank sitting outside, massive tanks, right? And they run the air inlet for the exhaust going out, and they run air in from the outside, and they rev it up to where it's at max RPM. This thing is screaming. They shut the door and they come back in a couple days. And all they're looking for are things that are going to break. Like, it's funny. I've been in there and the engine is cherry red. Like cherry red. And they're like, yeah, it's almost there. We're going to keep it going for another couple days. Because they're trying to break the things. Yeah. Like, it's a whole different mindset. I was talking to some of the engineers about this, and I'm like, so what do you guys do? Like, what are you talking about? we jump these trucks all the time. We jump them. We land differently. Like, you guys do Dukes of Hazzard? They're like, oh yeah, we do. We jump these things as far as you can. We crash them. We beat things up. We have 17 different trailers in there. We do. You guys think about max weight. We don't do max weight. We throw so much crap in there. We overload it 2 times as bad, and we try to break things. Like, they want to break things. That's their entire goal. Engineering is want to break things, and that's where, like, situations like the Tundra was a good example. The second gen Tundra, if you look at the mud flaps on the Tundra, there's actually big screws that go in, and different than any other of the automakers. And I said to the team, the engineering team, I said, why do you have these big bolts holding down the mud flaps? What the hell's going on with this thing? And like, why would you? It's a mud flap. And they're like, no. They said, we one day got some dealership complaints of mud flaps being torn off the wheel moldings. And they were like, what the hell's going on? And so they narrowed it down to a place in Canada, like this city in Canada. And so Mike Swears and a bunch of his team, 3 or 4 of these guys, flew to Canada. And they went there, and it was an oil rig company, right? So oil rig companies, they drive these trucks all the way out there, and they do a bunch of work to come back down. Well, he's like, look, he goes, we learned that they have this mud in Canada. This mud is, when it goes on, it's wet, it dries like concrete.
Mm-hmm.
And the extra weight was pulling the mud flaps down.
Oh, wow.
Nowhere else in the world we're having this problem. So we went back into manufacturing. We changed engineering. We had the bolt-on stuff. But he goes, then I had the team put a bunch of this mud in buckets, and we sent it back to our proving grounds. So that every vehicle we have now, we put mud in the mud flaps, and from the Canadian area, just the specific Canadian area, to see if it fails. So that's how detailed those guys are on making those issues non-existent. They want to fix those issues when they can, but there are a lot of times where it doesn't. Although, yeah, the Balkan all oil mud. Yep, in Alberta, Canada. Yep, that mud. It's funny. I talked to GM about that. GM does the same thing, and the same reason, because that same mud, GM does their same bolt-on stuff, and that's why other automakers. It's interesting. You go to their tech center, and they will take these trucks and disassemble them, because trucks are basically anywhere from 30 to 40,000 parts, right? And they have these big storage areas with big shelves, and they have everything marked. It's like scientific. It's like a NCIS, right? The crime scenes, right? Crap. And they have these and they are literally measuring the distance of sound deadening and foam and the bolt sizes. Man, these automakers they buy the new truck, they tear it all down, and they build it all back up, and they sell it. But what do they do with these things? Or crush them at that point. But that's what they do. So are there missteps? Do engineers make bad decisions? Yeah, they really do. Bad things do happen. They make bad choices, but ultimately they are trying to build the best vehicle they can. They also do have a margin, right? So, I've talked to many of them. They're like, if I change the sound deadening on the driver's side door by a 1/4 inch, I save a nickel. Well, then I take that nickel, I can put it somewhere else in the vehicle. So most vehicles are between 30 to 40% margin is because you have to have the margin from the manufacturer, because you have to pay for the transportation, dealership, advertising. You have to make sure you have room for incentives. It's just what the marketplace is. But they're always like, man, if I could save a penny here, a nickel here, I can put it somewhere else. And they're always playing these games about moving. It's a shell game. They're trying to move stuff around to make their vehicle better in ways that consumer realizes than anything else.
Yeah, man, it's. I think it's a battle of. You also have a lot of old guard retiring, and engineers that are. I see it with my kids. Where I will want to physically test things a lot harder than a younger person would. Where a younger person wants to simulate it on a computer or simulate it in a data model. Or maybe take something from the real world, make a data model of it, and then extrapolate it, where I would be like, no. You got to drive that thing 200,000 miles on Earth, not in a lab. Like, the lab's fine for the initial test. You can simulate lots of things. You could simulate cockpits with VR. You could do all sorts of things with simulations to get you to that point where it's then testable in the real world. But I would imagine that the engineers are just hands are tied, in a lot of these areas where it's build it to this spec. And I think even the car care nut talked about that a little bit, where he, just the difference between like older Toyotas and newer ones. And he thought that they didn't have the technology back in the day to maybe computerize and build them to a perfect spec that they do today to handle a perfect torque load. When, Sheldon was talking about the TFL differential that broke on that Tacoma, he was explaining how, many foot-pounds it went over torque, and that's why it broke the spline inside the front differential. And, they get so nerdy with it down to the point where they're controlling it with software instead of just, 10 years ago or 15 years ago, they may have just said, let's just overbuild that. Like, let's just throw a bigger spline in there because we know this will be safe. Like that would have been their approach. Whereas now they're like, yeah, but we could save couple ounces of steel there. It all adds up over the entire car, like you said, and it makes for maybe a little bit, everything's lighter, it feels smoother, everything rides nicer. All the new vehicles are amazing to drive. That's not my complaint. It's more it's like going back to the two camps of people, where you have people that want to buy things for reliability and long term, and you have people that are willing to buy stuff new and cycle them before they're out of warranty. My biggest concern, honestly, is this current kind of just smattering of vehicles from 2020 on, whether it's GM or Toyota or Ford. My concern is, what are these vehicles going to do outside of warranty, like the majority of them, if they're already having these failures, and it's not all of them that are failing. It's whatever, 1%, 5%. But if it's already at 1% or 5% in the first 30,000 miles of life or 50,000 miles of life, it's like, man, what's that going to look like for the secondhand market? And then you'll have these folks that maybe are stretching to buy something, because they couldn't afford the new one, but they can afford that used one at like 28,000 or 30,000. And it's like they're stretching, they have a higher interest rate, and then they're at 70,000 miles and the engine goes, and they tell them it's 25 grand. It's like, that's not acceptable. Like transmissions are, I was looking at General Motors, the 10, the newest 10 speed. If you have to buy that out of pocket, or the Ford, it's about 10 grand just for and that used to be a $3,000, $3,500. Like if your transmission went out in 150, it was like, yeah, it sucks, but it didn't wreck you. And now it's like, buy something out of warranty and normal people get financially wrecked, and I think that's what bugs me the most about it. It really isn't like, and it's probably not even a huge percentage of them, but if it becomes a big percentage, man, we could see a massive amount of just people in trouble, debt, bankrupt, whatever,
Sure. Yeah, no, it definitely, there's an affordability problem in the market. There's a big one there. Every CEO is talking about, there's affordability problem when it comes to used market as well. There's a lot of concerns. I mean, things are expensive. I had a friend who just had a Ram 3/4 ton. It was $15,000 for new transmission for that truck.
Yeah.
I put a 375 horsepower V8 in my 62, and it was $6 grand for the engine and $4 grand for the transmission. And that's just because prices have gone up. I mean, you can't even buy. If I was doing that stuff, people were like, just go at V8, the 350 V8 for like $100 or $200, whatever, junkyard. I'm like,
that doesn't happen.
What world are you living in, right? So I'm like, things have gotten expensive. There's two sides of the argument, right? There's a side that says that when something fails, it is more expensive. There is zero doubt. And what makes me upset are the sensors, right? So it's behind the exhaust manifold back end. You got to do this Gumby looking thing, twist your arm back in to get this $20 sensor, right? And it crapped the entire engine out to get this damn little sensor out. That drives me nuts. Yeah. And I've talked to engineers about that. And sometimes it's lazy engineering for sure. Sometimes it's junior engineering. It makes me mad about that stuff. But there's also the argument that says that vehicles are lasting longer. The average age of the vehicle on the fleet right now for the U.S. fleet is 14 years old. I mean, people are driving vehicles longer than they used to. I think actually the industry's got a different problem. I think they're really having a problem because they're building vehicles too good these days, in that a lot of vehicles are lasting longer than they probably should have. And the scrap yard around me is really empty these days because there's not many vehicles breaking down as much as they used to be. When I said I was growing up, 100,000 miles, man, that was it. You were done. But yeah, I could buy a $100,000 car for $2,000. Well, good luck with that now. I mean, it's very interesting the way the world has changed. And I think you have a very valid viewpoint. There's definitely that concern for that next generation customer. My concern is the computers and the copper wiring. I don't think the engines, transmissions, yes, as well, but I don't think engines are that as unreliable as used to be. I think transmissions have some problems. I think there's definitely some issues there. But I think about the copper wiring in vehicles, the computers, and the screens. Like, how much is that big infotainment screen going to cost to replace? That's a real concern. Do they fail that often? I don't know. I have this Mac I'm talking to you on this live stream on. I've had this Mac for now 8 years.
Yeah.
And it's still operating as good as when day one, right? Phones used to be, remember cell phones were like $100 and you had a cell phone, whatever, and now you had $1,000, $2,000, but they last longer. So I don't know. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. It's just, it's hard to figure out this new era we're in when you have guys like you and I that used to do the shady tree mechanic stuff and fix your own vehicles. And now you can't fix your own vehicles, but you don't need to fix them as often. But if something goes wrong, it is really expensive to fix.
Yeah.
And I watched those infomercials about, the extended warranty infomercials. I'm like, oh yeah, that's a big business going forward. I mean, that's an expensive business. I think there's definitely a piece to that for sure.
Do you ever talk to GM guys about the 10-speed with this valve body on back order? And I talked to Next Gen Diesel, the company that developed a fix for it essentially. And it took them a couple of years to engineer just different valves and O-rings for that valve body. And they told me that they had, I got to be careful. They said that they tried really hard to get GM's ear and to tell them they had a problem and to try to basically help General Motors and say, hey, this is going to become a problem. We see it happening. We've developed a fix for it. Probably telling them, hey, you can buy the fix from us or license it or whatever. Sure. And they couldn't get any traction. And now here we are 2 years later. I see so many people and hundreds of comments on just a small video that I have of people 2022, 2023, 2024. It's, their trucks are sitting for 3 months and they got a loaner. And then you see the most frustrating part to me is like, and I think the manufacturers have to start being careful about this. If you're willing to manufacture brand new trucks and pack lots full with brand new trucks, but then tell people that you can't get that one part that's this big and it's on back order, you're telling people that you're prioritizing new sales over the truck that they sold you. And after they sold it to you, they don't care. Like, that's essentially what you're telling people. And I think General Motors had a great year last year, but they have to be careful. They're going to have to. So yeah, turn it around.
I have talked to engineers about this stuff, and I've talked to marketing about this stuff too. Thanks for the super sticker there, Torque Wrench. Thank you for that. I have talked to them about that stuff. There's two things to this. First of all, engineers do watch those other videos because, again, engineers are people too, and they're industry, and they get home from work and they're watching your channel, my channel, and Bank's Diesel channel, and they're watching all these different channels, right? And they have two viewpoints in this. First of all, the viewpoint is, yeah, Banks and Next Gen Diesel can create new parts, and that's fine, and they can make new changes, and engineers like those changes, right? So, like, I put the new oil pan on my diesel, and I know the engineer watched those videos, and I'm sure he wanted to copy the design, but he can't because he's got to file a patent, and he's got to get a supplier on board. He can't steal the idea, right? That's a problem. But they watch that stuff. They also do talk a lot about, and this will frustrate some people, but they talk about how much testing is involved in those aftermarket companies.
Yeah.
So I remember the story. I remember talking to Dave, who's the head of AEV, yeah, American Expedition Vehicles, and he's the owner of AEV. And him and I were on a trail once talking about his products, and he said to me, he goes, it was the Colorado. He goes, I thought that we tested our products a lot. I thought our testing was above anybody else, best in the industry. When I teamed up with GM, I could not believe the testing we had to do. He goes, I could not believe how much testing was going to be. And it's so insane. Everything they do has to be at such a level because they have to warranty across the world and cover these claims in every different area. And like the Alberta of issue with the sand and stuff, mud. So that's a big issue. They do look at that stuff. So I will tell you, every diesel engineer I know knows Gale Banks by name, knows Next Gen Diesel, knows all those guys. They watch all that stuff because they're really interested in what's coming out. Because engineers, they want to make their vehicles better. They want, you don't get promoted by building a pile of crap, right?
Yeah.
They have a job, they have a career, they have a family, they want to they want to move up the corporate ladder. So they do watch that stuff, but they always come to me and say, we just don't know about long-term reliability pieces. Yeah, you can make it better. You can tell the customer you're making it better. It's a better design. And Gale Banks is great about this. And Gale Banks is a nice guy. And he's like, oh, I fixed that problem. I made it better. And the engineers are going, well, you can do that. Yeah. But what happens at 200,000 miles, 300,000 miles, 400,000 miles? That's their concern. So they do watch that stuff. And they do have concerns about aftermarket companies. They do keep track of the stuff. Now, on the valve body stuff, that pisses off engineers no end. Like, they hate the fact your truck's in the dealership. Like, they will call up every Tom, Dick, and Harry they know in the company and try to get part to you faster. The problem that people don't understand is that manufacturing is based now on a just-in-time delivery. So what that means is there is no stockpile of parts. So in factories, they do just-in-time delivery. So if you're going to build a truck, somebody brings a cart over and parks it in front of you, and you have just the bolts you need for that day. The next bolts are coming in, the shipment coming in later on tonight. They don't have these warehouses of different parts. And so just-in-time delivery keeps costs down because you're not paying inventory and overhead on additional parts in the factory. And it keeps suppliers going because they know they're going to build 50 parts every day and keep going. But what happens is, in a warranty situation, like a valve body situation, is now you have to go to the supplier and say, hey, we know you're delivering this many parts, but now we need you to deliver this many parts for warranty. Well, that's a hard thing from a supplier standpoint, because supplier standpoint, and that's, tariffs and things are a big part of this as well, is they have to find warm bodies to put in the assembly line to make new parts. Because you may have had a bad batch of parts. You may have had a spec came out, whatever. And, a truck is really a variety of parts from the suppliers. And suppliers do really good jobs. And sometimes they have a bad guy who does a bad job, because you have tier 1 suppliers, tier 2 suppliers, tier 3 suppliers. Like seatbelts. Seatbelts get sent across the border between Canada and the United States 8 times when they come into a vehicle. Well, that's 8 people that touch these things. Human error is going to play a factor in this. So when they try to build replacement parts, it really is a big problem. It's a more big problem when a new vehicle comes out. Remember when the Tundra came out in 2022, they had the actuator problem. The turbo actuator was causing a problem. I think what it was. Well,
wastegate issue, yeah.
The wastegate issue. Well, they only had enough parts to build the first run of trucks. So the guys who got that first wastegate actuator issue had to wait a longer period of time because they didn't have enough extra parts to build that person. That's one of the downsides. So one of the upsides of buying a brand new vehicle off first comes out is typically it's like the best version of the vehicle you're going to have, because before the accountants get in there and they start nitpicking stuff, whatever. And I mean, you can drive vehicles year after year after year, and towards the end of the life of the vehicle, you can notice that the sound deadening's not as good and the materials aren't as good, whatever. You find these differences. But if you have a problem with that first 2-3 months of that vehicle, you will be waiting a longer period of time than somebody else that came out with that later on, because just-in-time delivery, there's no extra parts being manufactured, and so you have this really supply chain issue going on. And that's the Tundra was a good example of that. They launched that during COVID when the supply chain issues and stuff like that going on. They were still dealing with that kind of stuff, and they had a lot of problems building Tundras because they didn't have enough parts. They didn't have enough suppliers, because suppliers go up and down, and you start doing. The thing is, like, every plant I've been to in the past 3 or 4 years has job openings. They can't fill the job openings at the manufacturer. Well, the manufacturer has the best UAW jobs. Guess what? Supplier level 3 is not going to get. Supplier 2 level is going to get. Supplier 1 is not going to get. So from a consumer standpoint, you're going, well, that's BS. I want a part tomorrow. You're buying a brand new vehicle. I can go to the dealership block, pull the part off, and then a brand new vehicle part, right? But it's not as simple as that, because when you look at the supply chain, just-in-time manufacturing, and how the whole system works, it really creates those problems.
Yeah, well, and then there's the argument of they shouldn't be having this problem in the first place on these new vehicles,
right?
That, man, I think that's the frustrating part for people. You see a lot of those. Do you ever watch Tow Truck Dustin's channel? He's got I mean, all those fuel pump issues with these brand new GMs, and it's like, he'll get it off the truck, and then the guy walks out of the dealership with a new fuel pump, and he sticks it in, and he's done. Or it's a module or something. He's done before it's off the flatbed, and it's like they know what's going on,
right?
And it probably takes a while to, the whole testing procedure, and then the restrictions. It's like your time to react to a problem like this is hindered because of all of probably the EPA, probably all sorts of things, where they have to meet these certain standards. They got certified at some level, and they got to make sure that the new parts fit in that little.
It's about a year. It's about a year, more than a year.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised. I mean, how long it takes for them to identify the problem, to narrow it down to a supply chain issue or the manufacturing issue, to figure out what really happened. Is it a design issue? Is it a part issue? Whatever, and then go through the compliance, work through suppliers, get it certified, and then get it out. About a year.
Yeah, and then the valve body issue is like, it's weird. People think they're the super complicated part, but really it's kind of goes back to like the right to repair stuff, where if we could get valve bodies on the secondhand market and not have to reprogram them, where a transmission control module didn't have to have the dealer reprogram it in order for the car to turn on, all this stuff is just getting so hard for people to, even when you have the ability to do it at home, I can repair a valve body and throw a new one in, no problem. But now I can't get the parts. There's part of right to repair. And then if I do get the part, I really need a rebuild kit and have to reuse the TCM, like everything.
Yes.
It's so tricky anymore to repair cars. It's just,
the right to repair is really interesting. I've talked to different engineers about this as well. They're frustrated about that too. I mean, they want competition in the marketplace. They don't care about dealers. I mean, people see dealers as being Ram or Ford or Toyota, whatever. They're not dealers. They're just, they're contractors, basically. They don't see it that way. But when you get door opening.
So did you see the cat open the door?
Did the cat open the door? I was like looking behind us.
The cat figured out he just reaches up and opens doors.
Well, cats are that way.
We had to put a lock on my daughter's, like a round knob, not a lever knob, because he just reaches up and goes in and tries to get the bird.
So I've been following the Massachusetts law. I get emails all the time about this. Figure out your cat. There you go. Right to repair is interesting, and really, what right to repair came down to was some hackers. Some hackers back in 2019, they took control of like a Jeep Cherokee. They drove it off road and in this field, and that freaked out everybody. And so then automakers locked down the systems, because automakers are then liable for somebody driving off the road and being hacked. And so they had to shut down certain systems. So like people love the over-the-air updates, and in trucks there are two systems. There are a dedicated computer. You cannot do over-the-air updates because it has the data in there for safety for the vehicle. And then they have over-the-air updates for radios, right? And they just didn't do that. And people love Teslas because Tesla's going to be fixed over the air, right? But understand that Tesla is a computer company that builds cars, and everybody else is a car company that builds computers. It's a whole different mindset. But right to
Yeah.
repair is really interesting. I think it's impacting the problem that really comes down to is independent shops are being charged an exorbitant amount of money to have access to the systems. That is the number one issue. The second issue that I think comes down to is, like you said, having somebody reflash the software and make those fixes. There are those two issues. And I tell you what, automakers are struggling with this because if they let you in too far, you can then go ahead and hack your ex-wife's car, and all of a sudden she runs off the road. Whoops, right? But if they don't let you in, then you have the pushback from government saying, "Well, why can't you do this? Why can't you do that?" I could see both sides of it because it's a tough thing. I mean, I see this in my area with John Deere tractors. It's a huge issue with John Deere. You can't fix tractors anymore, and tractors have become a combine's $400,000.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, corporate farming's taken over this. So I think we're in this really weird place where you can't fix it yourself as much as you used to. But however, we have this thing called YouTube where you can find ways to fix things. I fixed my dishwasher. I fixed my fridge by myself.
Yeah.
For no money because I found this place that sold appliance parts, and then I just kind of Googled it. They had actually video on the website. You buy the part, watch the video, how you replace it, and you're done.
Yeah.
I mean, that was super easy, much cheaper than what I was playing the appliance guy. But in the same respect, the refrigerator now used to be $200, is now $1,200.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we'll see where it goes. I know there's a lot of folks fighting for right to repair on the computer side of things with Apple and bigger companies, and Apple's getting worse, and I think everybody's kind of going that way where it's closed wall, can't repair anything, and then you can't get a hold of the chips, and it's just, even when people have the skill, it's like they're just blocking people out. But yeah, we'll see where it goes. It's what do you think about, I think about the cost of the perception of the cost of vehicles. The cost of vehicles is really, it does feel a lot higher to me with, I don't want to say it the wrong way, but almost like the trims that people really want to drive. So it's almost like it's frustrating, I think, for most people because they could get a work truck, but they would prefer to have some more options on top of the work truck. It might have the same powertrain as, the next level up and the next level up. And that's where most of the engineering costs went in. And, like the screens and all that stuff, like most of those parts behind the dash and everything are already, that adapters are already there. It's just, they're not plugged in. They don't have the little connectors on the ends. And it's frustrating for people that they can get the price down on the lower end trims, but then they've almost kind of consumerismed everybody into wanting the platinum or the limited or whatever. They put a screen this big in the lower end, and then the next one up is like that. It's like, there's like, shouldn't it have been like there to there, not this little tiny thing? And I think that probably frustrates people. But overall, I think the low end of trucks is, when you look at 10 years ago versus like in a GM 10 years ago versus now, it's the lowest end of the lowest end isn't that much more expensive, really. It's just
I mean, you tell people, like, remember back in the 90s and 2000s, like, you went the next trim level up, you got leather seats, right? That was a big deal. You got leather seats or cloth seats. You spend $3,000 for leather seats, and people could make sense of that, right? They're like, okay, leather costs more than cloth. I get that because I look at jeans and jackets and such. I know this stuff, so I can afford that. But now you're going, hey, you can get the leather seats plus the bigger screen, plus the sunroof, plus the remote starting your key fob, plus the better ride quality, plus different tires and things. And it creates this, oh my gosh, what's going on? I think that's one of the problems I have in my business is that I always get the top of trim level stuff, right? So I have a Sierra Denali, not Sierra. I have a Sierra 3-liter Duramax AT4X AEB edition sitting outside. It's probably $85,000. And I'll do a comparison to my new Ram Aerocho I bought because that's what people are shopping for, as far as that type of off-road truck versus off-road truck. But I think consumers have changed. The days of getting the SR5, the smaller screen, a lot of customers are saying, no, I don't want that. And then on YouTube, what do you see? You see the high-end trucks all the time. I rarely get a low-end vehicle. And it makes sense because from an automaker standpoint, if I send you the high-end truck and you, the consumer, sees these features and goes, well, I don't need that, it's easy for you to go down. it's hard for people to see the low end truck and go, well, if I spend a little more, what would I get?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, so they'd rather send you the high end stuff with all the options, and then you, the consumer, delete the options in your head and move your way down. That's how they see things. And then when I go buy trucks, I try to buy middle of the grade trucks. Although this RHO I just bought for fun. I got 12 grand off. It was fun. I have a good time with this thing. But I bought XLTs and I bought the limited Tundra. But I will tell you that they don't get the views. So from a business standpoint, I get frustrated too, because I'd much rather have a lower trim level. But when I do lower trim levels, people are going, well, I want them. What if I get a little more? What if I spend a little more? And when you talk about things in terms of payments, which is where we're at these days, people don't think in terms of overall purchase. You know, I spent $135,000 in 2 trucks in 2 weeks. I'm looking at payments because from my business standpoint, I'll never pay them off. I don't want to, because it doesn't make any sense. But that's what looking at payments. So if I go from an SLT to SLE or whatever GMC does, or I go from a RST to an LCZ, and my payment difference is $100, it's not about, hey, the payment's already $1,200. It's, what do I get from that $100, right? Then that's that customer that tells me that stuff in the comments and things, where that's where their viewpoint is. And so it is frustrating to go on YouTube and see all these high trim level trucks and not see the base grades, not see the stuff. But from an automaker standpoint, it's much easier for you to see the high trim level and work your way down. And the other thing that happens is that most of the changes that happen with a new truck coming out occur at the high end these days. You know, they'll take the screen that used to be in 2019, they make it standard now on the lower trim levels, but they offer new features in the higher trim levels. So really, the new stuff they're trying to promote and offer from a marketing standpoint is on the newer trucks and on the higher trim level trucks. So that's what they want to send.
Yeah.
And like, I'll get like a Tundra, and I'll get the Tundra will have the new, whatever the TRD Pro color that is that year. Because every year they change the color by, whatever, green and orange, whatever.
Mud bath or whatever.
Yeah. And they'll send that one out because that's the only change they have for that year. And so they want to show off that as a change. And it's frustrating for me because people come to me like, well, Tim, gosh darn it, you only show the high trim level crap, and you are I was like, well, that's all I get, right? I don't choose trim levels. I don't choose those things. But it is frustrating when we see that stuff. Like I remember the Sierra Denali Ultimate with the Vader Chrome grill and the screens and stuff. I mean, I'm not going to tell you it didn't suck driving around for a week. I'm not going to tell you that at all. I mean, I'd love to tell you it was terrible, and I wish I would have bought my, my junker from the 1980 square body, drove that around. But it's a nice truck to drive around, right? And then I look at the customers though, and the middle class is really stretched. I've never seen a middle class in my life that's been more broad, right? So the new millionaire isn't anything these days. Remember when millionaire was a big deal? Yeah. Nothing, man. You're not a billionaire. You're not anybody, right? I mean, it's just the trillionaire. You got to be trillionaire now. I mean, things have changed so much. And there's a new millionaire to me made every day on YouTube. And those guys don't give a crap about money. They're just buying whatever they want to. I remember Street Speed 717 did this video years ago. He bought a TRX and lit the thing on fire. He jumped a creek, lit it on fire, did this, and people were so mad. And we have a eternal private Facebook group of automotive professionals that some of us get on there. And the people were just pissed off with this guy for lighting a truck on fire. And the video got like 3 million views. And you know the numbers now, right? And I'm like, well, he probably paid for his truck by the video. And they're like, no, he didn't. I'm like, no, he probably did. Probably lifetime that, 5 years from now, he's probably that video is paid enough to pay off the truck, right? Because that new customer, the changing customer is going, I don't care about that stuff. I want the top trim level stuff. I'm buying it. I have a cheap house. I don't care. Remember the things 90s we're all chasing, the neighbor trying to build a bigger house neighbor was, you have kids and I have kids, and these kids don't care. As long as they have good Wi-Fi, they could be in a shed in the middle of the northern Arctic countryside. They don't give a crap about that. And they want to have a nicer truck though. I mean, so it's like, it's so different how things have changed. And my generation your generation is, we don't want to spend that much money. I hate spending the money I do on trucks, but my accountant tells me. My tax accountant called me out last year in her office because I did not spend enough money. It cost me more money.
Yeah, you're gonna give it to the government.
Yeah, And I'd love to buy lower trim levels. I really would, but it costs me more money to buy them.
Yeah.
Which is fascinating to flip that around. But yes, there are, and I think what's happening now is we have people that can't afford the trucks that they are buying. They're stretching out 10-year loan terms. They're putting themselves in the distress because they see somebody has it and they aspirational want to do that because they're matching with the Joneses and they have these issues. Well, yeah. And Whistling Diesel is another great example. We have these, we call them enthusiast channels. Doug DeMuro, Whistling Diesel, Street Speed 717. Their enthusiast channels are showing this stuff up and the cool stuff they're doing. And they're jumping them and they're wrecking them and all kind of stuff. Well, that's putting this mindset in people's head that they have to be that person. And you don't. My 62 C10 does the same job that my RHO does.
Yeah.
Now, I'd much rather drive my RHO. But, not to the gas station. The gas station really hurts. But I'd love to drive it more than my 62, but the job hasn't changed.
Yeah.
But the customer's changed, right? These corporate farms. I saw a guy have a King Ranch Ford truck with a spreader behind it spraying weeds with that because it made more sense for his business and for his farm to buy the King Ranch over the XL and XLT from a tax standpoint. And then he was like, well, I want a nice ride to town. Why not get a better truck?
Get massaging leather seats and that.
Yeah. I mean, farmers are getting older, man. I tell you what, I got back issues. I love massaging seats. I will. I'm guilty as charged.
Yeah, I haven't gotten there yet. I don't know what it is, man. I can't buy a $60,000, $80,000, $8,000. I just can't do it. I would find some other way to spend the money in the business. Like I'd rather go buy land and be like, I'm going to build a off-road track or something to test it. I don't know why. I think it's because I currently have paid off vehicles. I just bought a brand new car and I don't have payments. I hate payments. I hate debt. And I feel like it's one of those, it's like parental modeling. I want to, show my kids, like, you shouldn't have these things that drag you down and make you this feeling that you're a wage slave all the time. And I went through that in my life. And, it was just figuring it out. And it took years of working 2 jobs and getting rid of the debt, having, and now I just have no debt other than a little bit of mortgage left. So it's just and I don't know. It's like PTSD for me. Eventually I'll get over it and buy something new. I'll come, you'll see me next week with an AT4 or something, but lifted
on 35s, gold suspension painted
and then complain that I don't get good mileage because I have 37s on it. So and offsets.
Yeah, no, I can appreciate that. And we're all in a different period of our lives, and it is frustrating to see the bigger YouTube channels and buy those kind of stuff. And I fought it for a while, but I actually wanted to buy land, and land is a tough thing to buy. It's because you don't do the same tax schedule you do on buying trucks because they changed the section tax code 179 and made a big difference. You can write up as much of the trucks you want the first year. With land, you have to do a 10-year, 15-year write-off. And so your eventual tax savings are just tough. I tell people all the time on my channel, especially, never buy vehicles like I buy vehicles.
Right.
Don't do that. Don't buy like I do. Just don't try to live my life I do because it makes no sense. It doesn't make any sense at all. I buy things for stupid reasons. I buy them because of the newest things out there, which, agreeably maybe shouldn't do. I've seen 2-year-old trucks have more problems than first-year trucks. I've seen all sorts of things over the years, but it's just because of the way the business is, and the way the views are, and the way YouTube is, and the way taxes are. It's very frustrating, but it's that's just the way the business is. And I tell people all the time, like, don't follow my rule. It's a different mindset. I did not want to buy a truck. I remember 21, I made a bunch of money during COVID. COVID was good for me because people were at home watching YouTube.
Yeah.
Frankly, it worked out great. And for me, and it hurt other businesses, and some businesses never came back. And I really do feel bad for the small businesses, but I didn't want to buy a truck. And I went to my tax accountant and I laid my numbers down. She goes, "You're going to owe $35,000. You don't buy a truck." I went to the bank. Bank said, "Go buy a truck." Went to the wife. She goes, "Buy a truck." You know what I couldn't do? I couldn't buy a truck because there's none available. So, and every year I go to buy a truck, and man, I am just like, I stress about it. I stress about it. I stress about it because it's a YouTube game. If I buy a Jeep Gladiator, for example, it's been out for a while. Nobody watches that stuff. If I buy a used truck, nobody watches that. You have to buy the newest stuff, right? And people are talking about real. So yeah, cars are not a good investment. They're not. I'm not telling you they are. Real estate's much better investment, but from a business tax standpoint, and realize this business is on YouTube is about views. That's what the business is. And if you don't buy new vehicles in my type of business, you don't get the views. And so you don't get the views, you lose the income, you pay more taxes, you end up, losing your business. It sucks. Yeah, Roth IRA, I looked into that. Does not save as much as you think. Leasing actually is a bad option for my business in that lease payments, you only write off the payment each month. So if your payment's $1,000, you take away the interest, you may only make $800 in savings each month. And the other problem I have is that leasing always gets people confused. New vehicles come out in the fall of the year. So I only write off 2 or 3 payments for the entire year. Well, that really sucks when you need a $35,000 write-off. It doesn't make sense. It really doesn't. I know I've talked to a bunch of different tax accountants over the years, and it's only in my particular business, in my particular role, in what we're doing. In every other business out there, it's totally different. Totally different. So
yeah, I saw TFL was doing the same thing at the end of last year. They were like, well, the accountant told them, hey, we got to buy a new Ram or whatever it was. They same exact thing. And they bought their ranch and all that stuff.
I've known Roman for years, and Roman gave me the idea to buy a truck because of what he was doing. And so I talked to Roman about it. Actually, I was on different press trips with Roman back to back, which is kind of strange. And Roman and I were talking about it. I've actually been at a ranch, and Roman's viewpoint of buying the ranch isn't about the tax savings. It's about the fact that it can film in a location that doesn't get them pulled over all the time by viewers. Yeah, because understand they're in Colorado, and you probably in the area, but you go in the mountains, Colorado, and people know who you are. Me in Nebraska, I do on the road. Nobody gives a crap who I am. But in Colorado, they couldn't film, and he wanted the place to be able to film indoors. And I've been to the ranch, and he's putting a big building on the ranch, and it's a different part of his business. Now he is in a very different tax bracket than I am. And so it's definitely it's a very different type of conversation to have with him. But Roman, I've known Roman for years. Roman and I talk about things all the time. And he basically gave me the idea because when the tax code changed, what happens to them?
Yeah, he was talking about the same thing you did about he maybe gets 18 videos. They kind of have it around 18 videos on a new truck, and then they just get rid of it, whatever it is. And it just doesn't, because the views slow down, and it doesn't make sense to keep investing. They had to pay camera guys and
I don't want to get that big. I don't want to get as big as he is with all those issues and things. I think I do a bit, and Roman does a better job with doing the iCalling things. I've done the iCalling for years. I used to live in Salida and Buena Vista. Used to drive Denver all the time. The iCalling is just a hill. It's just whatever. But they do a really good job with that. They do a really good job with drag racing and the iCalling. They've done a really good job with that. I tend to do more deep dives than they do, so I keep my vehicles longer because I want to do that stuff. I do more modifications than they do, and I know why he doesn't do that stuff, because modifications are time suck. I mean, you have somebody in the shop filming the labor guy doing it, and you got to pay for the labor, and you got to do this. Luckily, I have some people in town that are good friends of mine that have shops that help me out with that stuff. But it's again, for most of the audience, it doesn't make any sense. And you log on YouTube, and it doesn't make sense. But then, like you start on YouTube path, you start doing your channel, start watching stuff, and then it starts making sense in a way. It's still like, I don't want to spend the money, and I appreciate that and buy something. But then you start going, you know what? Actually, it does make sense with this, and it does make sense with that. It does, and you start understanding that piece of the business. But YouTube is so bizarre from a business standpoint that people don't get it. And I play golf a lot. I play golf with some retirees, and I only play with the same retirees all the time because I can't stand explaining my job to people in their 70s all the time.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I don't know how long I'm going to do it, but we'll see where it goes. I mean, it's been fun so far, and when it's not fun, I won't do it.
Yeah, perfect. Well, I told you an hour and around an hour and 49 minutes. So I think we're
Yeah.
probably beyond time.
We bled everyone dry.
All right. All right. Thanks everybody watching. Make sure you check out both of our channels, and you can find his link in the show notes. And as well, if you're on the channel, it's Car Guy Online. I've done the pickup. I had a really long name. If you do a really long name, it's great. There's a long story behind the name, but check out those channels as well. We're always putting out content that maybe I think sometimes it kind of goes together. Like sometimes it fits together. Like I do review something, you talk about what's going wrong with it. You know, kind of we're not competition. I don't do that very often, but I think it kind of works together in both ways. And we have lots of good conversations. And so we'll do more of this stuff. Anytime things come up, we'll do more live streams because these are fun. So as always, thanks for watching. I will see you down the road. And you want to take us away?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. I appreciate it. This is my first one, so we'll see. I'm gonna do more. I kind of enjoyed it. It's much better than video editing, I'll tell you that. So that was a lot more fun.
And